Hello, I'm Fraser Myers, Deputy Editor of Spikes, and I'm absolutely delighted to be joined today by Shabbos Kestenbaum, a political commentator at PragerU. Shabbos, you've just come off Piers Morgan's Uncensored. The show took place remotely, but it was due to be in London, and we could have connected there. But unfortunately, your debating opponent was prevented from coming to the UK by the Keir Starmer government. So people may have seen the news that Cenk Uygur and also Hassan Piker as well separately were banned from entering the UK. Shabbos, I mean, you're obviously an opponent of these people. You're an opponent of Cenk's, but presumably you agree with their right to speak and you were looking forward to having this debate in person.
Yeah. First of all, I'm an ideological opponent, so I abhor what Cenk believes in, but I think as a person, we're both Americans, and I support his right to free speech just as much as I hope that he supports my right to free speech. I'm doubly upset, though, as I was telling you earlier, simply because my whole extended family lives in London, so I was planning on getting some dinner with my grandmother, so another reason to hate the Keir Starmer government for denying Cenk. But what I will say is yes, there has been an objective, blatant erosion of free speech in the United Kingdom. We have seen it not just with Cenk, but with the Communications Act of 2003, with the Online Safety Act. And we have seen individuals in the United Kingdom being arrested for Facebook posts, for things they've said critical of the government on social media. And I think it is a very dangerous precedent to tell individuals that you are not allowed into our country simply because we have arbitrarily, subjectively, and secretly decided what viewpoints are accepted in the political discourse. I don't think that's very healthy for a flourishing civil society. I don't think that's good for democracy. And ultimately, I don't believe that's good for Western civilization. So as you said, I'm an opponent to what Cenk Uygur believes in. I was looking forward to a really robust debate, hopefully not too much yelling. And it's a shame. It's a real shame. And I think this is a damning indictment on the Starmer government.
And the government will say that, well, their language, their very vague language is that these people's presence in the UK is not conducive to the public good. I think what they're getting at there is that they believe that this will stir up possibly racial hatred, that this might be bad for social cohesion, things like that. Now, those sound on the surface to be like noble aims. So why do you think it is so important to be able to thrash out these debates, have these debates, talk about these ideas, even when, some people may really find them objectionable, really find them offensive and even potentially intimidating?
Well, Cenk actually pointed this out on the Piers Morgan show, and I think he's right. It's very counterintuitive because the more you try to censor an idea or opinion, the more people will gravitate to that idea and opinion. So it's actually entirely self-defeating. It, A, just doesn't work. But B, more fundamentally, again, I think what separates Western civilization and liberal democracies from third world countries is we're not afraid of ideas. I had mentioned that I was friends with Charlie Kirk, and he always taught me that, and he taught millions of people that the only way you combat bad ideas is with better ideas. It's not with censorship. It's not with, hate speech laws. And that's why I find the excuse of he's not conducive to the public good. I mean, maybe that's true. It's impossible to really ascertain simply because they're so discrete and subjective as to what they mean by that. But if they really were interested in people being conducive to the public good and to diminishing racial animosity, then perhaps they should have done something about the weekly hate parades that march through London every single week. Maybe they should do something about the boats coming in to the United Kingdom every week, every day with migrants. Maybe they should do something about the fact that you have radicalized primarily Islamic communities within the United Kingdom. I mean, that seems to be far more of an important task than dictating whether Cenk Uygur can give a speech at Oxford University or come on the Piers Morgan show.
Yeah, I think a lot of people in Britain are absolutely baffled by the fact that the government can suddenly stop people coming from the country when it chooses to, despite the vote, as you say, hundreds and hundreds a day. Shall we get into the ideas specifically that you oppose? What is it about someone like Cenk, or him specifically? Let's say what are the ideas that he's pushing that you agree with most robustly? You disagree with most robustly?
Because I was going to say agree, not too much, but disagree. I would say, look. It is totally legitimate to have questions about the American-Israel alliance and relationship. It is totally legitimate to criticize the Israeli government. It's totally legitimate to disagree and to actually be abhorred by the conduct of Israel in fighting Hamas in Gaza. The problem I have with Cenk Uygur is fundamentally he views Israel as the planet by which we all orbit. So anything, whether it's tariffs, whether it's immigration, whether it's gun control, whether it's the economy, whether it's the Epstein list, all of it revolves around Israel. And that's why I was trying to tell him how frustrated I was that he immediately pivoted to this is the Israel lobby that's preventing me. This is, Jewish power. He didn't exactly say those words, but it's alluding to the fact that there's this outsized role that Jews play in political life. Because the much stronger argument should have been that free speech is under attack. I mean, he totally ignored the fact that just 2 weeks ago, so many pro-Israel activists, including pro-Israel Jews, were banned from coming into the United Kingdom for Tommy Robinson's march. So if you just want to say that this is because of Israel, well, that doesn't make any sense because all the pro-Israelis are also banned from coming. He totally ignored the fact that you have someone like the British Home Secretary who doesn't like the state of Israel, who made her political career, at least the early days, talking about hands off Palestine and the occupation. So if you're really trying to convince me that it's the Israel lobby, then why did the United Kingdom exactly sanction Israeli ministers from coming into the UK? Why did the United Kingdom end free trade negotiations with Israel? Why did the United Kingdom have essentially a military arms embargo that continues to this day? Why is it that Jews are being stabbed in broad daylight? Why is it that Jewish volunteer ambulance corps are being blown up? I mean, if the Jewish power is so in control of the United Kingdom political discourse and culture, then they have an odd way of expressing it, because I don't think any of that is true. But again, I think he's just so wrapped up in these preconceived political notions, and dare I even say conspiratorial thinking, that he's not willing or even able to have open intellectual conversations about the greater issue, in this case, free speech. It just all goes back to Israel, Israel, Israel. And it's silly. It's just tiring at this point.
And in terms of something like anti-Semitism, I mean, the Cenk Uygur account of anti-Semitism is basically that Israel is responsible, like Israel's responsible for everything. Its actions are leading to a backlash in London, in the United States, in Europe, and that is rebounding on Jews in a way that he would say is unfair. I take it you don't quite agree with that.
Yeah, it's a totally ahistorical take. First of all, the Holocaust was roughly between like 1934 and 1935, depending on how you count, to 1945. The state of Israel wasn't created until 1948. So if anti-Semitism is a result of the state of Israel, then how do you explain like the Spanish Inquisition of 1492? How do you explain the genocide of 6 million Jews that ended 3 years before the state of Israel even existed? How do you explain the Kishinev pogrom in Ukraine, which was 1901? Like, how do you explain any of those things if it all goes back to Israel? So historically, he's just wrong. I mean, it's just not true. But then ideologically, he's essentially making the argument of, yeah, you were sexually assaulted, but your skirt was kind of short, right? I mean, it's just classic victim blaming. And what it does, it absolves I shouldn't just say Palestinian, but Muslim terrorism from the fact that they are the ones who are responsible for their own actions. They have free agency, they can make moral choices in life, and they have decided to wage acts of terrorism against not just the state of Israel, but of Jews. The Pittsburgh shooter in 2014, I believe it was, when he shot up the Tree of Life synagogue in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, he shouted, "All Jews must die." He didn't say the Zionists, he didn't say the Israelis, he said all Jews. And it had nothing to do with Israel. It had to do with he had a hatred against the Jewish people. And I think what Cenk does is he will try to explain away anti-Semitism by simply saying it's all because of Israel, and it's just not true.
And do you think it's possible to be anti-Zionist without tripping into anti-Semitism, without using these same kind of tropes actually that we recognize?
I get asked this the whole time. I've been asked this ad nauseum for basically 3 years now. And my new answer is it essentially depends on how you're defining both of those terms. So I'll put it this way. I'm an Orthodox Jew. I don't know what gave that away. The yarmulke, the fact that my name is Shabbos, but in theory, I'm praying 3 times a day, right? When I pray, in those thrice daily prayers, I talk about the return to Zion dozens and dozens and dozens of times. I face Jerusalem. Jewish men have been doing this uninterrupted for 3,000 years. The entirety of the Jewish calendar revolves around things, with the exception of one holiday, revolves around things that happened either in or about the land of Israel. There is a positive commandment out of the 613 commandments that Jews are obligated to do to actually live in the land of Israel. As I said, Jews have actually been living uninterrupted in the land of Israel for 3,000 years, sometimes in greater numbers, sometimes in smaller numbers. So the idea that you can disconnect Jews from Judea, our ancestral biblical homeland, would I call that anti-Semitic? Probably. I think a much more powerful argument is, irrespective of the anti-Semitism, it's also just stupid. It's a stupid argument because it's just not based in reality, history, logic, or data. We have an intrinsic attachment to the land of Israel. We've been praying for peace in the land of Israel way before the establishment of the State of Israel in 1948, way before Theodor Herzl's first Zionist Congress in 1897. So it really depends how you're defining anti-Zionism or Zionism. So for me, Zionism is not really a political movement. It's not actually connected to the State of Israel. It has very little to do with operations in Gaza or Hezbollah or Bibi Bibi Netanyahu. It has to do with the fact that as part of our religion, we are tied intrinsically to this land. And if you deny that connection, yeah, that probably is anti-Semitic. But I think a lot of nefarious actors, what they'll do is they'll say, well, you believe that criticizing the Israeli government is anti-Semitic, which, like, as I just told Piers, I've been Jewish since the first breath I took. I have yet to meet another Jewish person on planet Earth who will tell you that criticizing Israeli policy is somehow anti-Semitic. No one believes that. No one believes. In fact, the people who are most critical of the Israeli government are Israelis. I mean, you should come to Israel. It's all they talk about. But I think what really is dangerous territory is when you say, yeah, I have nothing against Jews. I have nothing against the Jewish people. I just don't believe that they have any right to live in their ancestral homeland. I mean, that to me is kind of just crazy.
One area where you've been especially active is around student politics, and particularly in relation to Harvard. How bad have things got there since October 7th? And it seems to meet two of the evils that we're talking about. Both, you have a lot of repression of free speech on campus, and also a great deal of anti-Semitism. But how bad have things got there for people who don't know?
Yeah, well, I'll start with the second point first, and I'll work my way backwards, just in terms of the free speech, because I think this is a really important point to make. As I said earlier, the only way you combat bad ideas is with better ideas. It's not with censorship. I think I'm sort of an outlier in the American Jewish community because I don't think canceling speakers helps. I just don't think it works, and I don't think it's what democracy is about. I don't think that's what higher institutions of higher learning are meant to be about. So that's number one. We should not be canceling speakers. You have a right to be anti-Semitic in the United States. I don't agree with it. I don't think you'll get very far in life. I don't think people will want to associate with you. You might have a problem getting married, but you have a right to be anti-Semitic. You have a right to be racist. You have a right to be sexist. You have a right to be homophobic and Islamophobic. You can do all of those things. I don't like it. I condemn it, but you can do it. The problem I have when it comes to anti-Semitism are just like physical acts of violence, is the breaking of law, is the exclusion of people because of their Jewish background. When it's a violation of law, then we must act. But when it's just people, don't like Jews, they think we control the banks, they think we have horns, they think we killed Jesus. Those things aren't true, but you have a right to believe in those things. So that's first and foremost. There is this bizarre fiction that the mainstream media has concocted whereby we can either protect Jewish students on American campuses or we can protect free speech, when that is entirely a fiction. The greatest threat to free speech in the United States today are college campuses and or the pro-Palestinian movement, because they're the ones who throw rocks through the guest lecturers. They're the ones who cancel guest lecturers. They're the ones who set up these encampments and homeless shelters in the middle of the quad. They're not interested in free speech. They're not interested in the intellectual exchange of ideas. But in terms of the practicalities of the question, what has it looked like? I'll talk about Harvard specifically. We had an American Jewish student who was spat on for wearing his yarmulke. We had an Israeli student being told by her professor to leave the class because her nationality made others uncomfortable. Another Jewish student at the business school was physically accosted. It was caught on tape. A Harvard staff member vandalized our hostage posters, writing on the 9-month-old baby Kfir Biba's quote, "His head is still on, where's the evidence?" Writing on Noah Argamani, another Jewish hostage, that Jews did 9/11. He then challenged me to debate him as to whether Jews in fact orchestrated 9/11. We of course had the encampments whereby you were allowed to violate all internal Harvard policy. You were allowed to follow Jewish students on their way to class so long as you did it in the name of Palestine. So that's just Harvard. I could talk about Columbia, Penn, UCLA, Yale, where I would argue it was probably worse. But I'm a little biased. I worked on the Trump campaign and I'm a supporter of President Trump. There has been a big shift because of President Trump. So withholding, or at least threatening to withhold federal funds, really has worked. Cracking down on diversity, equity, inclusion initiatives, especially on public universities, has worked. Deporting foreign students who have violated the law, which is a very important distinction. It's not for expressing Palestinian support, it's for violating the law. That has really worked. So we are seeing a change. Having said that, though, we can defund all the universities and it will not change the ideological culture, the subculture of a hatred against the West, a hatred against America, and of course a hatred against Israel. But I think a hatred against Israel is a manifestation of a much greater societal ill, which is of course hatred of Western civilization.
Shabbos, thank you very much.
Thank you. I appreciate it.